not be the purpose of life. You don't know what the answer is, but he knows that he can't place his hope in earthly things that are fleeting just like he is. And so this is where he turns in verse 7, and he says this, and I'll read on through the end of the chapter. He says, "And now, O Lord, for what do I wait?" He says, "My hope is in you." He says, "Deliver me from all my transgressions. Do not make me the scorn of the fool." He says, "I am mute. I do not open my mouth, for it is you who have done it. Remove your stroke from me. I am spent by the hostility of your hand. When you discipline a man with rebukes for sin, you consume like a moth what is dear to him. Surely all mankind is a mere breath." Selah. And then he says here in verse 12, he says, "Hear my prayer, O Lord, and give ear to my cry. Hold not your peace at my tears, for I am a sojourner with you, a guest like all my fathers. Look away from me that I may smile again before I depart and am no more." So David expresses hope here at the beginning of verse 7. He says, "My hope is in you," but the psalm is not going to end very nicely. It's going to end, again, very depressing, very, very dark, and we'll get to that in just a minute. So he's trusting God in the midst of all of these questions, but how does he continue to reconcile this idea of, I'm fleeting, but God still cares? Wilcox says this about why David can still trust even amidst all these questions and not really having any answers. Wilcox says the psalmist's questions have not been answered, but what he does know about the person outweighs what he doesn't know about the problems, and that person there is God. He says what he knows about God outweighs the problems, what he doesn't know about the problems. And what he knows about that person, or what he knows about the Lord, is that while he is the one that rebukes and is disciplining him in the midst of his sin, as we see that's what he's going through, he is also the one that delivers. Maltaire says, "Only the Lord's favor can deliver us from the Lord's disfavor." So things are kind of clearing up a little bit for David here. Obviously not totally clear, but they're clearing up somewhat. And he realizes that all these things that he's going through, a lot of these questions that are stemming from the punishment that is coming on him, the rebuke, the discipline, it's a result of his own sin. He says, "Deliver me from all my transgressions." But the question that David is dealing with is, why do you even care? He's asking God, why do you care? Why do you care enough about me? I'm just a mist that's going to vanish. Why do you care enough about me to discipline me, to rebuke me? He has all these questions and he don't know the answer, but he does know that the Lord is the one who can deliver him from his sin and the consequences of his sin. How that's going to come about, he certainly doesn't know. So in the midst of that, he cries out to God to hear his prayer, to hear his cries, and he just simply says, "Look, I just want peace. I want peace before I inevitably die." That's what he says here. "Look away from me that I may smile again before I depart and am no more." David is in a very, very dark place here. He's in a very dark place. He doesn't know the answer to all these questions that he has. He sounds a lot like Job in Job chapter 10 verses 20 through 22. And Job says this, "Are not my days few? Then cease." And he's talking to God. He says, "Are not my days few? Then cease and leave me alone, that I may find a little cheer before I go. And I shall not return to the land of darkness and deep shadow, the land of gloom, like thick darkness, like deep shadow without any order, where light is as thick as darkness." Again, pretty depressing, pretty morbid. That's Job speaking. And David says the same thing. He says, "Look away from me. Just leave me alone. Leave me alone so I can smile again and just have a little bit of peace before I die and am no more." And the psalm, it ends that way. It doesn't end on a happy note. It doesn't end with a neat bow. David simply wants a little rest before he dies. And why is this? Wilcock writes, "So far as he can see, There will be no more opportunity afterwards for the kind of worship, the praise, and the service with which he is at present familiar. So simply, he's asking for peace simply because after this, as his life fades away, there is no more. David can't see past what he's going through right now. He can't see what obviously our minds can look to the future and say there is coming a day when all this will pass. David can't see that right. Sometimes we can't see that. Even this side of the cross, we all oftentimes can't see that. We can say it with our minds, but really the way we pray and the way we live our lives says a different story. It speaks, a lot what David is speaking here. So he's saying, just deliver me so I can have some rest. My days are short, and I would just like a little bit of peace in this time. And then he says this, he says, he sees himself as a sojourner with the Lord, and a stranger, a guest. He says, like all of my fathers. And for David, this is not a good thing, really. It's not very comforting. He's kind of just wandering aimlessly. But the Bible tells a different story about sojourners, about pilgrims, about aliens in this life. And David sees it as this thing of, I don't have anything. I can't take anything with me as I go. It's not a very pleasant outlook. None of my questions are answered. David says, I've got more questions than I got answers. But he still trusts in the Lord, but nothing's coming to fruition. He's asking these questions. He still don't know anything that's going on. And he just says, I'm a stranger. I'm a stranger to you. And so he doesn't really understand what's going on. He thinks he's distant from the Lord, and he's just walking around aimlessly. But we see something different. What David can't see is that the brevity of his day is a good thing. David can't see in the moment that the Lord's discipline is a good thing. He can't see in the moment that his being an alien or a stranger, a pilgrim, is a good thing. He can't see that because for him, just in that moment, all he sees is the shortness of his life and that one day he's going to pass and there's nothing else. He hasn't come to terms yet with why, God cares for me as one that is fleeting. But as we look back on it, as we look back at where David's at, we kind of just want to say, David, this discipline is a good thing. It means you're a child of God. This brevity of life that you're going through right now, it's a good thing. You don't want to live here forever in this world. This idea that you're a stranger and a pilgrim, David, that's a good thing. It means you're not made for this world. But we forget that like David does. But this is what we see in the book of Hebrews. The author there, he looks back on God's people, because David says, I'm a sojourner just like my fathers, just wandering aimlessly. But the writer of Hebrews says, he looks at Abel and Enoch and Noah and Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, all the fathers of David, all of which were strangers and pilgrims. And the author says this, he says, these all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, and were persuaded of them, and embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. For they that say such things declare plainly that they seek a country. And truly, if they had been mindful of that country from whence they came out, they might have had opportunity to return. But now they desire a better country, that is a heavenly country. Wherefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he hath prepared for them a city. What the author of Hebrews is saying is that, David just simply couldn't see fully. He couldn't see fully. He couldn't see, he has faith that the Lord is his hope. And sometimes that's all we have. We certainly can see that our citizenship is in heaven and that the Lord is preparing for us a place. But sometimes we're just like David. We have that hope, but we can't see it. We don't set our minds to it and our hearts to it, and we don't reconcile within ourselves that this life is not always fun, that we're going to experience the discipline of God, We're going to experience a lot of hardships in this life, but it's worth it. When we ask that question of what is it that God cares, sometimes we have the same outlook of David. But instead, we need to have that mindset of it's a good thing that the Lord is concerned. It's a good thing that my days are numbered. It's a good thing that the Lord disciplines me. It's a good thing that I am a pilgrim on this earth, but a citizen of another city, another place, a better country. And so David just simply can't see this right now. And so he's wondering, and he never comes to any kind of answer. He never has a solution here in this psalm. He can't comprehend the brevity of his life, why the righteous suffer, and there are so few days. But even in the midst of those questions, he trusts God. He just simply trusts God and understands that the Lord is his hope and his deliverer. And thankfully we can look back on this psalm with hindsight, and say that all these things were good. All these things that David is bemoaning in his life at this point, and he just can't see simply because of his place in redemptive history. On this side of the cross, we can see those things now. We can see why the righteous suffer. We can see why we go through as Christians the things that we go through. We can see why we feel so strange, or why we should feel so strange in this world. It's because we're preparing for something better, a better country, a better home. And so, I think what we take away from this, on this side of the cross, as we have hindsight, as we can look at what David went through, and now as we see the whole picture, as much as we can, we shouldn't have this mentality of, the brevity of life is a bad thing. So let's just eat, drink, and be merry and do whatever we want to and live however we want to, because I don't understand why God even cares for us. But instead, we should have this mentality of, I have no idea when I'm going to die. I have no idea what the number of my days are. I have no idea how much I'm going to suffer or what I'm going to go through in this life or the disciplining hand of the Lord when it is going to come upon me. But I do know that I have a better hope. I have a better future. It's a good thing that our days are short, because it just means that we're going to our heavenly home and experience that heavenly inheritance and citizenship even sooner. So what David can't see, thankfully we can see. And so we all get in ruts like David. We're all going to have questions. We're all going to have sin in our life at different points. That doesn't mean that we don't have faith. It doesn't mean that our faith is in vain. In fact, David's ability, and this is important, his ability to turn to God with those questions shows where his trust lies, where his hope is. He's not blurting it out for the rest of the world to see, for the rest of the world to answer his questions. He's taking all of that doubt, all those questions to the Lord, because that's his only hope. He knows that's his. He don't know the answers to his questions, but he knows the only hope for his deliverance is in the Lord. So let's have that mentality of, though my days are numbered, I don't know what I'm going to go through, I will still trust in the Lord. So I want to give us some time tonight, just a few minutes, spending time in prayer wherever you're at. Just take a few minutes and just be honest. Just be open, just be real with the Lord. Whatever it is you're going through, whatever questions, listen, God is not surprised. Your Heavenly Father is not surprised by your questions, and your concerns, and your fears, and your worries, and your doubts, and all these different things. The life of faith turns all those things back to God. So do that for just a few moments. I'm going to come up and close this.